We are now going to have that conversation with Eskom spokesperson Sikonathi Mantshantsha. Now, the power utility says that unlawful industrial action at various power stations has impacted the planned maintenance and repairs. Eskom says that at some stations, no workers have pitched up for work at all. And as a result, stage 4 load shedding will continue until Wednesday. And for now, we are joined by Eskom's spokesperson Sikonathi Mantshantsha as we try to get him on the line. Just to give us a sense of exactly what the situation is this morning, and also what does it mean when Eskom says that things could change at short notice and we are already on stage 4. So Eskom spokesperson Sikonathi Mantshantsha joins us now. Sikonathi, good morning and welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to the viewers.
Sikonathi, let's just start by taking a look at things at Eskom at the moment as we speak, and the situation as it pertains to industrial action.
Sabina, as we speak right now, there have been some disturbances this morning of protesting employees, preventing those who want to go to work at some of the power stations, including Duba, amongst others. But the situation is under control at this moment. This happened during the night. We do have the police assisting to clear the roads, and the traffic has started moving in, and indeed the commodities that are required to produce electricity. We are, of course, now on stage 4 load shedding, which will continue until about Wednesday, and there will be an update before then as to what the system looks like. And of course, Sabina, anything can change any moment depending on the situation on the ground.
And we know, Sikonathi, from experience that when Eskom says that, it means that the stage load shedding that we are on is usually ramped up. So at the moment, if we look at the grid, the generation capacity reserves that Eskom has currently, does that mean that we could go to higher stages of load shedding if things change?
Strangely, at this very moment, we have 31,000 megawatts of capacity available to serve the country. So there is, as things stand at this point, there is no reason to think that things will change for the worse. We are actually in a good system. But as I have said, there are disturbances that keep preventing people from doing their jobs and from returning units to service. Should we have breakdowns and we are unable to return those units, then of course, yes, we might have to increase the stage of load shedding.
Does that mean stage 6 is something that we could see this week?
There is no reason to speculate, Sakina. Eskom can implement up to stage 8 when that is required by the system. But there is no reason to speculate. We will keep the public informed as soon as anything changes.
Not speculating, Sikonathi, but looking at the precarity of the situation at the moment. As you say, if anything were to change at short notice, you could ramp up the stage of load shedding. So just as we speak right now, without necessarily venturing into the realm of speculation, let's say, for example, if 1 or 2 more breakdowns are reported, would that mean that we move on to a higher stage of load shedding?
Yes, of course. If we have breakdowns that really tip the country into that require more load shedding, then we will have to increase to more load shedding. As I have said, Eskom can implement up to stage 8 when the need arises.
So just to remind the public, Sikonathi, what has caused this latest industrial action?
There have been wage talks at the Central Bargaining Forum with 3 trade unions. That's the National Union of Mine Workers, the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, and Solidarity. They represent about 30,000 Eskom employees who fall under the Bargaining Forum, whose wages have to be determined via negotiations. The rest are in management positions. The trade unions, particularly NUMSA and the NUM, opened with a demand to increase wages by 15% for the year. Eskom could not afford this. In the end, Eskom made an offer that would, if accepted and implemented, increase the wages by an average 4.7% for the year. This is in 3 categories. There will be a 4% increase, a 4.5% increase, and a 5% 5.3% increase. This staggered approach has been designed to try and eliminate or narrow the pay gap between employees, and this was rejected by unions who have now their demands standing at 10% increase, which is clearly unaffordable for a company that has been living on bailouts, cash bailouts from the government since at least 2015, a company that has been making losses, and this clearly cannot be afforded where the public is already bailing out Eskom.
So is that the only sticking point, Sikonathi? What about conditions of employment? Because I've heard from at least some of the labor union representatives that Eskom has unilaterally changed some of their conditions of employment.
During the bargaining talks last year, after they deadlocked, Eskom unilaterally implemented a 1.5% increase for across the board in the bargaining forum, and it did include some unilateral changes. That process, that is for the last year already. That process is still at the CCMA, where there is arbitration going between the trade unions. It's not about this current financial year. This year, the unions are demanding, they started at 15%, and they are now demanding an unaffordable 10% wage increase. Eskom has offered a 4.7% increase.
With regard to that CCMA situation, and as you admit, Eskom did implement some unilateral conditions of employment. What were those in the main?
The details, Sakina, is quite long. I would have to sit and study each and every one of them. I might misrepresent the issues, but that was in last year's wage talks, and it will be determined and settled independently of the current process.
It may be so, but obviously the unions are saying that that is part of the reason why they have embarked on this particular industrial action, in addition to the increment, because members not happy with some of those unilateral implementations. But moving on from that, Sikonathi, with regard to the current situation, now stage 4 load shedding, and you say that some of the power stations obviously will be impacted, but at which levels? And what is your main concern at Eskom at this stage?
Our main concern is the intimidation taking place where those striking employees are preventing people and in the process breaking the law and acting contrary to the democratic spirit. Eskom has obtained a court interdict to stop them from intimidating colleagues who want to go into work, to stop them from blocking access to power stations, and indeed as an essential services company, they should be going back to work. This is an unlawful action, as the court did determine last week. The major problem right now is whether our colleagues, those who want to go beyond the call of duty and service the people of South Africa, are allowed and permitted by their counterparts who do not want to work. The biggest issue is, should we have breakdowns? There is already 4,000 megawatts of units at risk that cannot be repaired due to the industrial action. Should we have further breakdowns, this might have to force the Eskom to increase the stage of load shedding. And we already have been under severe strain before the industrial action. Eskom was implementing stage 2. This country does not need this kind of disruption, this kind of sabotage, this kind of illegal activity by trade unions who should be representing the people of South Africa.
So, with regard to that, Sikonathi, and the union saying that, well, Eskom had already implemented stage 4 before the start of the industrial action. So to make out that this is part of that particular problem is disingenuous on the part of Eskom. But looking at the timing of it, strategically, it is the middle of winter. We've seen massive disruptions, not only to the electricity supply, but of course the knock-on effect. You've got traffic that becomes a mess. When load shedding happens, businesses are seriously affected. Sometimes cell phone masts, phones are off. But of course, all of this under the auspices of Eskom, who obviously continue. So how do you put this to the South African public that they should have any sort of confidence still in the power utility, Sikonathi?
The people of South Africa do not deserve these disturbances. As I had said already earlier, Sakina, Eskom has been implementing load shedding even before the current impasse with in the bargaining forum. So the system has always been vulnerable without this kind of industrial action. And as Eskom has previously and consistently communicated to the people of South Africa, this country needs a lot more generation capacity than it already has at this point. To have the little that we currently can operate being disrupted and undermined like this serves really to kick the public in the teeth. It is not possible to run a country like this. It is not possible to run a power system like this. So it is in everybody's interest, including our labor partners, to come to the table and find a resolution under the law and respect the rule of law. At this point, Sakina, I must also pay tribute to there are thousands of Eskom employees who go beyond the call of duty and defy the intimidation to deliver services to the people of South Africa and make sure we have the lights staying on, however limited that may be. There are thousands of employees who really go out of their way to make things work under very difficult circumstances.
Generation capacity, and Sikonathi, in as much as you say that, you know, Eskom has done its best to keep the lights on, although in a limited fashion for the most part. But it is obviously an undesirable situation for most South Africans. This should not be happening. And the question has to be, does Eskom actually have a solution to the power outages, to the load shedding problem going forward? Because is this something that you are saying as South Africans we are going to have to just live with for however long?
Sakina, this should not be happening at all. I'm now referring to the industrial action itself, because by law, Eskom is an essential services company where this kind of action is illegal and unlawful. So it should not be happening. But another thing that should not be happening is load shedding itself. Even beyond the industrial action and these disturbances, it should not be happening, yet it has been happening for at least 15 years in this country. Does Eskom have a solution? For the benefit of the public, I will repeat this process. By law, Eskom operates the power stations that it currently has and is permitted to operate by the shareholder, by the government. The government itself is responsible to procure additional generation capacity, to decide what power stations must be built and who must build them and what technology must be used. That responsibility lies in the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. Anyone that needs to build a power station, including Eskom, must first obtain operating license from the department. We have, as Eskom, been calling to the country and to the government for the past at least 3 years, saying this country needs an additional 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts to get rid of load shedding. And that gap can only grow because the older power stations that Eskom is relying on, at least 4 of them should have already been retired years ago. That again widens the gap and increases the need. So the only time that we will really see any significant improvement is when we have serious additional capacity coming on stream. Now, I must also pay tribute and thank the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy for the efforts it has made so far in procuring new capacity in the form of renewable energy, the independent power producers that have been signed on. Unfortunately, though, that power is not yet coming into the grid, and it will take another 18 months for us to have any additional capacity, and this is about 2,000 megawatts, which, as I have said, is still insufficient to meet the full needs of a growing economy and to keep the lights on. We do need additional capacity, and the responsibility to bring that capacity lies outside of Eskom.
So you're saying, Sikonathi, that at least for the next 18 months, the reality that we are experiencing now will continue?
The reality we are experiencing now will continue until we have additional capacity sufficient to break this back of load shedding, and that is between 4,000 and 6,000 megawatts. What is coming in the next 18 months is only 2,000 megawatts, and that's not enough to end load shedding.
So in other words, we're going to have load shedding for the foreseeable future, and we don't even know how long that is. What we can say for sure is that it's more than 18 months.
What we can say for sure is that we will have load shedding until there is additional capacity that has come to generate electricity. It does not have to be Eskom. The country needs more electricity. It does not necessarily need more Eskom.
So just in the interest of consumers at the moment, you said at least another 18 months for an additional 2,000 megawatts to come onto the grid. In the meantime, with regard to the power stations that are really severely constrained, there's Medupi, there's Kusile with massive overruns. What is the situation there? And from Eskom's perspective, what is your solution, quite apart from what the Department of Minerals and Energy has to assist you with? What is Eskom's solution at this point to at least try and improve the situation?
Thank you, Sakina. Last week, Eskom announced that it has signed contract, or it is in the process of signing contracts with at least 18 projects who will invest on renewable energy on land that is currently owned by Eskom. They will list that land on a commercial basis, and that will bring about 1,800 megawatts. This is made possible by the relaxation in the law, which allows parties to invest up to 100 megawatts of capacity and find their own buyers. So Eskom has selected 18 projects, and they will again add to that 2,000 I have spoken about. They will add about 1,800 megawatts. That will be done without a cost to Eskom, without a cost to the taxpayer. There will be no guarantees, and those investors have found their own buyers for the power. But that increases the capacity available. So that's the first step, and this Eskom has done because the red tape has been reduced, and it can lease out the land, from which, by the way, it will earn revenues. Those companies will pay Eskom for using its land, and those companies will pay Eskom for delivering or wheeling their electricity to their customers using the Eskom network. That's an additional 1,800 megawatts. Now, you asked about Medupi and Kusile. Medupi is working at full capacity minus Unit 4, which did experience an explosion last year. Eskom has said that unit will be returned to service during August 2024. The rest of the 5th-generation units are performing as required after the design defects were corrected at Medupi. At Kusile Power Station, now there are 4 generating units that are contributing electricity. And again, these are working at full capacity, but we have had some problems with the new technology there, the flue gas desulfurization, which serves to eliminate the environmental emissions. The units now haven't undergone that repair for the major defects, are now working and delivering the full power as required. There are 2 additional units at Kusile that are still under construction, and we have told the country that the last of those units will come in during 2024, and construction will therefore be completed at those power stations, and we will get the full benefit of that infrastructure.
So just what are the cost overruns on those 2 facilities at the moment? Because what were they initially meant to come in at, Sikonathi? 165 billion, was it?
The cost to build Kusile Power Station is just under 160 billion rand. The cost to build Medupi Power Station is just under 140 billion rand. Of course, there have been serious delays of about 6 years on each plant, and the costs have almost doubled from what they were originally budgeted at. And that's a matter that is in the pages of the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. All those matters have been discussed in there, and the reasons for that. There are people that are being tried for corruption with regards to Kusile, but that's not enough. There needs to be a lot more arrests going on. Eskom has laid more than 100 charges of criminality, that is fraud and corruption, against people who used to work for Eskom, who benefited from impoverishing the country by doubling the costs there. A lot of it was due to the corruption, and as I have described earlier, the design defects that occurred that have now been corrected in the large part.
And you know, the Zondo Commission and all of those actions is one thing, and that's all good and well, Sikonathi. The other problem is if things continue as they have been, what's the point? Because if those overruns, as you spoke about the explosion last year, the design defects, and you're still having problems with bringing those two entities on to 100% working capacity, has any of the contractors there been penalized? Has anybody been fired to bring in people who can actually fix the problems?
As I have said, Sakina, first, in terms of Eskom and employees, a lot of them have had to leave Eskom, others have been fired, others resigned. And I spoke about the charges that Eskom has laid of corruption. This is against its own employees and indeed against contractors, where we have not seen much action in the way of prosecution or arrests. When it comes to Eskom, the design defects that I've spoken about, correcting those design defects at Medupi and at Kusile, we have previously announced consistently since 2018 that the major contractors and Eskom agreed what the problems were, the technical problems at the power stations, and they also agreed what the solutions would be that should be implemented. But they could not agree on who was responsible or accountable for those. The parties therefore agreed to pay each 50% of the cost to fix the defects, which has now happened, and then they will determine who was actually in the wrong, and that party has to refund the other. Now that's a lengthy court process because profits were made in this. Other parties have the companies have since changed ownership and stuff like that. So all those companies are never going to just volunteer to return the billions that they have taken from the people of South Africa for this. This is a matter that would have to be decided in courts. And let's remember, each of those power stations had more than 30 contractors working on different aspects of each power station. So determining who is actually responsible for the defect is going to be a lot more difficult, and take a lot longer than it is to fix the problem. So the major issues have been repaired. Eskom has to now take those parties and try and reach agreement on repaying on paying for those damages, which will really never be enough because, as I have said, the costs have doubled to build the power stations, and as we stand here, nobody is in jail for all of that criminality.
And that is the point, isn't it, Sikonathi, that the same people who broke it are now seemingly the people who need to fix it. And I'm not sure how that's going to work. But in addition to that, and I think the crux of the matter for the consumer is that cost is simply passed on to the consumer. Eskom paid those contractors, and now you're saying Eskom will have to fork out another 50% to fix what went wrong in the first instance. So in essence, the consumer then forking out 150% for a job that is still not complete. And that is the crux of the matter for consumers.
This is 50% of the particular defect that had to be corrected. So 50% of that cost would come from Eskom and the other 50 from the contractor involved. So that's settled. The reality of the matter, though, is that you cannot build a power station and then realize it does not work and then walk away. It has to be fixed, and it has to deliver for the service that it was built for in the first place. So we have a situation where all the power stations have to work. The cost, as I have already said, has already been paid by the people of South Africa, and for that we need justice to have the people that committed these crimes, including the construction companies, dealt with by the law. But that is outside of Eskom's purview. Eskom does not make arrests. Eskom does not make prosecutions. That is the duty of the law enforcement agencies. And Eskom has done its part by laying the charges. And of course, Eskom has also recovered some 2.5 billion rand from some of those contractors, that money that was illegally paid out of from Eskom. And as we have said, there are other court cases where Eskom is attempting to recover some of the monies from some of the people who used to work for Eskom. But that is not all. What is required is to get the power stations working in order to reduce the strain on the system.
Final one, Sikonathi. Analysts and many South Africans say that you don't know what you're doing.
It's very well for everybody to say we don't know what we are doing. We have Eskom employees who have been working on this project, who have gained experience in running the plant. The reality of the matter is Eskom's power stations are on average 43 years of age. I said earlier about 4 power stations should have been retired about 10 years ago. So the infrastructure is quite old and unreliable. It does not matter how clever you are, how smart you are. A power station that is 60 years old will not be able to deliver as well as a power station that is 5 or 10 years old. That is the reality of the matter. Hence the call for new infrastructure, for additional capacity in order to relieve the strain on the system.
Sikonathi, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much, Eskom spokesperson Sikonathi Mantshantsha there, and basically making it clear that load shedding is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. And the foreseeable future is anything from 18 months and beyond. In fact, it is beyond 18 months from what Sikonathi was saying, because the additional capacity that's required to stabilize the grid will not be realized within the next 18 months. So it's beyond that. That's what we're going to have to make peace with as South Africans. Well,